So in this video we're going to look at the issue of direct controls. So what are direct controls? They basically, when a government intervenes directly to regulate the price, the quantity of a specific factor or a specific product. A good example would be rationing. So in times of emergency, such as World War II, Britain introduced rationing to prevent inflation, where you're allowed so much food. Other examples would be maximum prices and minimum prices. So for example, rent controls are an example of a maximum price, often resulting in less accommodation being available. Minimum wages would be an example. Quotas on imports would be an example. See a video on that. And indeed capital and currency controls, which we'll look at shortly in a bit more detail. All of these result in market distortions, in other words, government failure, because of unintended consequences. For example, if you have a really high minimum wage, it's likely to cause unemployment. We've mentioned rent controls. If you have a maximum price of something like rice, okay, it's going to be cheap, which will help poor people, but not if farmers stop producing rice on such a large quantity, and therefore queues form at shops, resulting in an unintended consequence of actually harming the poor, for example. So, if we look at capital controls, there was a time in the 70s, really from the end of World War II until the 70s, when many countries such as Britain had capital controls. And these are basically currency controls where you weren't allowed to take more than, say, £200 out of the country at any one time for a certain time period in terms of cash, in terms of money. So what happened is many countries since the 80s, as part of globalisation, have abolished capital controls. Now, there are some good effects of these. First of all, it's likely to increase economic efficiency because capital will flow to where it's going to make the greatest return on a worldwide basis rather than being restricted to one country. And basically, it should help emerging economies, it should help poorer countries because there'll be capital investment. FDI will move from rich countries where there's more saving to poorer countries, and capital will be invested in new industries that might diversify emerging economies and reducing the narrowness of their production base. So capital flow from rich to poor countries. That should happen in theory, but in practice it doesn't seem to have happened. And some of the problems with capital controls are, firstly, a country might experience large inflows of hot money, which are resulting in asset price bubbles, which of course would have a destabilising effect on the country and could have an inflationary effect through a positive net wealth effect, for example. If you have a large capital inflow, large currency inflow of hot money, it could result in the appreciation of the currency. Just remember to distinguish between hot money, which is short-term, and foreign direct investment, which tends to be long-term. So here we're looking really at hot money and its consequences short-term. So if you have an appreciation of the currency, because there's an inflow into that currency, it could cause Dutch disease, which is explained in another video. Also, you could have the opposite. You could have sudden outflows, where there's a loss of confidence in your country. There's a sudden outflow, there's a run on the currency, resulting in a currency collapse. This could be seen in the Asian currency crisis that occurred in the very late 90s. And a more general point is that if you abolish capital controls, then you lose monetary policy autonomy, because you can't run your own monetary policy and maintain a specific exchange rate and have open financial markets with no capital controls. This trinity is not possible because if you want to maintain a fixed exchange rate, okay, you need a certain interest rate to do that, but that policy could be wrecked if there's a sudden outflow or inflow. You're not going to be able to maintain a specific exchange rate, are you? So if you want a specific exchange rate, you need to set your monetary policy accordingly, but you can't have sudden outflows or inflows of the currency because that's going to change your exchange rate. So what's happened in the world, in the Bretton Woods system, which was a system of pegged exchange rates which were fixed to each other, in the Bretton Woods system there was a limit to capital movements. There were capital controls. And this meant that you could have a fixed exchange rate and have monetary policy autonomy. But since the 80s, many countries have abolished exchange controls. It's meant that we've had to move to a world of floating exchange rates to a greater extent. So the pound, the dollar, indeed the euro are floating. There's monetary policy autonomy, but there are no capital controls. Okay, so I hope that explains the importance and use of direct controls. Thanks for watching.